Hey everyone, Pivot here. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to this video. I was asked to do a presentation about my PCT journey for my mom's community. She lives in a seniors community and they asked me to do a presentation. So we recorded it and I got a lot of interest of people asking if I could please record and put it out on my channel for those that couldn't make it to the actual presentation. So I did that. It's by no means the most professional recording. So no professional sound, no professional stage. This was just in their small clubhouse. It was a very intimate presentation, but so I hope that you can forgive the quality of the video and the sound and everything, but just enjoy me telling my story. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy this presentation that I call Pivot My Way Home. Enjoy.
So I'm very happy to be here tonight to share with you some of the events that took place during my hike of the Pacific Crest Trail between April 6th to September 10th of last year. And I would like to thank the residents of Horizon Village for having me here tonight. So before I get into my hike on the PCT, I just want to do a quick introduction of myself, explain what the PCT is, and tell you a little bit about my background and what led up to this adventure. So for those of you that don't know me, even though Tony just introduced me, my name is Deborah Langford. People on social media and on the trail know me by the name of Pivot. So I've been hiking since 2015, which is something I started doing shortly after my father passed away. I'd had a lot of loss and trauma in the 2 years leading up to his passing, and I was desperate for an outlet for the pain, and I needed a peaceful space for healing. So a friend asked me if I would go hiking with her, and I agreed, but I let her know that I have never hiked before in my life, so no promises on how this goes. And so we chose our first trail, which was in Grand Cache, Mount Ambler. And as I climbed that first mountain, I was instantly hooked. So from there, I began to hike in earnest, and over time I became an avid hiker and backpacker. And I absolutely loved everything about backpacking and was never ready for any trip to be over. I could be out there for 10 days and I would be like, let's do it again. So the idea of backpacking a long distance through hike began to form in my mind, and doing a trail like the PCT just seemed like the next logical step for me. So what is the Pacific Crest Trail? So the PCT is considered a long distance through hike covering 2,650 miles, so that's 4,244 kilometers of mountainous terrain starting at the US-Mexico border up through the mountains of California, Oregon, and Washington. And it ends at the US-Canada border just south of Manning Park in BC. It takes the average hiker anywhere from 4 to 6 months to hike the entire length of the PCT, and depending on their daily mileage, rest days, weather considerations. To successfully through hike the entire trail takes a lot of dedication, mental and physical toughness, and a smattering of good luck. So the most common response when telling people I was going to do this was, why? Why on earth would you want to spend 4 to 6 months living out of a backpack, carrying only the things that you absolutely need to survive, like shelter, sleeping bag, food, on your back, and hike 10 to 30 miles every day, day after day? Like, you must be crazy. And yes, I think I am. Being equipped with this particular brand of crazy is definitely helpful to pull this off. No normal person would think that this sounds like fun. But to me, it sounded like a dream come true. And it really was. So every thru hiker has and knows their why. For some, it's to live outside for a time and just to be one with nature. For others, it's to see what their body is capable of doing. Some people do it to find the answers that they're looking for in life, and some to heal from hurts and traumas. And for many, it's about finding meaningful connections and experience what true freedom actually really feels like. For me, it was all of these things, as well as a calling that I felt that God had put on my life. So after 3 years of planning, saving, dreaming, and training, I secured my PCT trail permit and would start the journey on April 6th, 2023. Now, there are many aspects to this trail and this talk that I could have chosen to talk about. I could have chosen to talk just logistics and details of the trail. But for me, this is a very personal story, so I'm going to be sharing my personal journey, my thoughts, my emotions, things that happened to me along the way. So this is where my story begins. And I would love to tell you it's a story all about sunshine and roses, and that every day was perfect and wonderful, and that I had the time of my life. And that would mostly be true. But I wouldn't be doing my story any justice if I didn't also share with you some of the heartbreaks, the tests, and the trials. It's a story about learning to let go, about being adaptable, and adjusting expectations. It's a story about learning how to love and be loved, acceptance, and connection. And so I'm going to share with you tonight the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. So part 1, Southern California. Chapter 1, Mother Nature throws a fit. So going into this adventure, it was my absolute intention to hike the entire 2,650 miles. There was no doubt in my mind that if my body would let me do it, I was going to do it all. I was pretty certain about that. And then Mother Nature had a hissy fit of epic proportions, dumping snow into the mountain ranges of California with storm after storm after storm. By the end of February, California had 300% of its normal snowpack in the mountains. Yeah. The last big snow years were 2017 and 2019 at 200% snowpack. So this meant the class of 2023 was facing something that no other class had ever faced before. So I'm no stranger to hiking in the snow, clearly. And I purposely hiked in the mountains of Grand Cache during the winter so that I would be comfortable in those conditions. But even equipped with micro spikes and an ice axe, I knew that this kind of snow was beyond my skill level. So facing altitudes of 10 to 14,000 feet with 300% snowpack, that's no longer hiking, that's serious mountaineering. So even before getting on trail, I had to adjust my intention and my expectation about hiking every single mile. I decided not to be disappointed about it, and that I would see what it was like when it got there and make a decision then, because after all, it would be 700 miles and 2 months down the trail. Who knows what it would do by that time? Pivot. So chapter 2, expectation management. So the first 700 miles of the PCT are considered the desert section of the trail. It's the section that makes or breaks a thru hiker. Those first 700 miles see the highest dropout rate of the entire trail. Long distance through hiking any trail tests both your physical and mental game. Many people drop out because of physical injuries, which is usually caused by pushing too hard too fast. And the rest drop out for reasons of the mind. Every single day, the PCT tests you to see if you are worthy of being there. It's a power struggle to see who will win. It'll either be her or you. When she wins, you go home. When you win, you stay to hike another day. And I believe that every hiker experiences this in their own unique way, whether they understand that it's happening or not. And I was no exception. I believe I was about as physically and mentally prepared as I could be going into this. I trained really hard. Every year I increased my total kilometers hiked. Every year I challenged myself to backpack further, longer, and harder. And I knew my stuff. I knew my gear, and I knew my body. I was confident and I was ready. And I was also incredibly naive. It's very easy to get swept up in the romantic idea of the PCT, imagining all the beautiful scenery, the epic wide open spaces and the mountain views. And the romantic idea of meeting so many people who love hiking and backpacking like you do, and forming trail families or tramilies with your new best friends. It's the picture of it's very idyllic. But the reality is that the PCT is hard. The hiking is physically demanding and mentally draining. Meeting new people every day and navigating social aspects of the trail is exhausting. And managing my expectations versus the reality, that nearly took me out. It didn't take me long to realize the PCT had one goal in mind. She was going to do whatever she needed to get me to quit. She started with physical pain. Lucky for me, I enjoyed the torture of hiking. So I knew it was going to be hard, and I knew it was going to hurt. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by this. I was surprised, however, by the presentation of that pain. In my 8-year hiking career, I had never experienced what I did on the PCT in terms of pain. I learned quite quickly that I was no longer in Kansas, Toto. My training ground of mostly natural, ungroomed boreal forest floor, a mix of soft mosses and springy soil, that was nowhere to be found. In its place was an intentionally created and groomed 18-inch path that was so compacted by years of heavy use that the soft desert sand I had expected was so hard, it was like walking on concrete. Throw in the sun, baking that sand, and reflecting that heat back up into the bottoms of your feet, it was so painful. My feet had never been so angry with me before. Most hikers develop serious blisters in the desert as their feet adjust to hiking every day. Not me, I didn't have a single blister. Instead, I developed intense nerve pain all along the soles of my feet. Yeah, it was like my feet were on fire, and the only thing that gave me any relief was stepping into every single water source that we came across, shoes and all. I quickly realized that the socks I had were too thick, therefore too hot. They were too compressive, causing more pain as my swelling feet had no room to expand. And in around day 4, I developed what turned out to be metatarsal neuroma, which is basically just nerve pain in the toes. If I stopped walking, the pain would stop. And I could never find a rhyme or reason for its cause or how long it would be painful for. It came and went completely randomly. I also experienced chafing on the insides of my thighs from my shorts rubbing as I hiked, leaving my skin raw and almost bleeding. Never ever experienced that here. I covered my skin with Leuko tape, which didn't really work. And then I ended up using safety pins to fold over the extra fabric so that it couldn't rub, and to make them tighter. And I thought that was a pretty clever solution, and it helped a bit. But it became very clear that in our first town stop of Julian, I was going to require a visit to the gear store for a gear pivot. I swapped out my shorts for a super sexy pair of rainbow colored spandex bike shorts. They're hideous. But I loved them because the chafing issue cleared up perfectly. I also found a lighter, looser pair of socks that, while didn't cure my foot pain, it did improve it by about 10%. So as we continued hiking, I still experienced a lot of foot pain, but it felt more manageable, and I no longer felt concerned about whether or not it was going to take me off trail. It appeared as though I had won this round of the PCT trying to take me out. So she switched tactics. Time to attack me mentally and socially. I keep saying we, so you must know that I was not hiking alone. A friend of mine from home, Barb, also came with the idea of hiking the entire trail. We had planned to stick together for as long as we could, understanding that at some point, it might come to a point where we would end up not hiking together for whatever reason. My brother graciously drove Barb and I all the way from here to the US-Mexico border. Once there, we were joined by my mom, Sherda, and her friend Della, and we had a really nice send-off into the void. Those first few days, I was so thankful to have Barb there with me. It took the pressure off of having to socialize with others. It also meant that I wasn't hiking or camping alone. Our first day, we hiked over just 10 miles, which is 16 kilometers, and we were so proud of ourselves for finding a nice place to random camp. So random camping is not something we typically do in Canada. Here you have to pre-book all of your campsites so you know exactly where you're going and which camp you're going to. That's not the case on the PCT. It's all random camping. If it looks like a tent will fit, it's good enough to camp there. So in those first weeks, we saw a landscape of rolling mountains.
Oh, wow.
Devoid of trees, but alive with bushes, flowers, and an array of different cactuses. So I was actually surprised about the variety of plant life that we encountered for the desert. It was not devoid of life. And we became friends with the zillions of lizards that are scattered everywhere. Every few steps, they hop out in front of you. I saw butterflies and hummingbirds every single day, and every night an owl could be heard hooting. I became convinced that that owl was following me because I heard him every day throughout the desert. Despite all the pain I was in, I was captivated and blown away by the beauty of the California desert. We saw some of the iconic landmarks that first-time PCTers get a thrill out of seeing, like a well-known water source sign, unexploded ordinances, don't get off the trail to pee there, and then the famous Eagle Rock.
Isn't that cool?
And the wide open spaces did not let me down. This is exactly what I had come to this trail to see. By the end of our first week and a half on trail, our tramily had grown from just the two of us up to 5. We were joined by Marit, whom we had met and connected with prior to starting the trail, and then Luke, the only boy in our group, and then a girl named Helena, whom we met and made connections with along the way. We had met many, many more friends and acquaintances that we would see on and off throughout the days and the weeks. At first, it was a lot of fun hiking with the group, sharing the experience of it all with them, laughing and learning together. I was quite happy. The picture I had had in my head of having a big happy tramily seemed to be coming true. Things went well for us for about the first 100 miles, but the pressures of 5 different personalities and ideas and wants slowly started to form cracks within our tramily. Even though we chose to hike as a group, we were all actually there for our own individual and unique experience. I personally found it difficult to balance what I wanted versus what the group wanted. As I began to feel like I was growing stronger physically, I wanted to start hiking more miles in a day. I mean, we couldn't continue to hike only 10 to 12 miles a day indefinitely. At some point, we were going to have to start pushing ourselves into that 20 or 15 to 20 mile a day. More miles in a day meant needing to get up earlier, and as we progressed out of spring and into summer temperatures, getting up earlier became even more important to beat the heat of the day. The others in the group did not agree with me on this and did not appreciate it, and often cast me as the bad guy when I would suggest that we try and push ourselves. There was always reasons why we couldn't do more miles, like we might run into snow and therefore it might end up going slower, so we better not shoot for 16 miles, let's just do 12 instead. And having a mindset of limitation is just not me, and I found the limiting beliefs to be very frustrating. Town days were also a real struggle for me. Town days are busy. There are numerous chores that need to get done in a very short amount of time. So showers, laundry, post office, grocery store to get all your food for the next section. But town days are also supposed to be for rest and recharging, to have some downtime and give your body and your mind a break before heading back out on trail. Times all of this by 5 people trying to do all of those things all at the same time with different opinions on when and where to do anything. Our town days were not restful. They were chaotic and stressful.
This is what a hiker room looks like on resupply day / pack shakedown day. What a mess.
So couple that by the fact that I was the only non-drinker in our group, and drink was very high on the priority list for the others. I was not only a bit of an outsider within my own group, but as they would drink and get louder and more carried away, I would have no escape for the peace and quiet that I was desperately needing and craving. So depending on how many miles it was between town, we would have a town day every 4 to 7 days. And it only took a couple of town days for me to begin to feel really stressed about them. The thought of going to town filled me with dread and anxiety, and this feeling only amplified the further the trail we got. So with cracks beginning to form and pressures building, we continued on as a group. We reached Sentto Mountain, which was our first real test and encounter of the epic snow levels. At just over 10,000 feet, San Jacinto is dangerous in a normal year. Many people have gone missing and or have died by slipping off the side of this mountain. To do the entire mountain range in one go takes about 7 days. So with our added winter gear, such as microspikes, ice axes, and warmer clothes, plus 7 days of food, our packs were heavy. I had argued for doing this range in 2 stages. Hike for 3 days, drop back down into town, resupply for 4, go up and finish the last 4 days. That way our packs would only have 4 days of food maximum instead of 7. I was outvoted in favor of doing it all in one go. And I won't lie, I was really unhappy about that. I thought that decision was unwise and unnecessary. And it wasn't long before my body let me know that it agreed. I struggled to carry the extra weight in my pack up that mountain. I was born with hip dysplasia, so the fact that I can hike and carry a heavy backpack is pretty amazing as it is. But I also know that I have to be sensible. I live with the knowledge that my hips can end my hiking career anytime they choose to. This weighed heavily on my mind as we continued to climb. I voiced my concern to the group and was met back with the comment from one of them that all our packs are heavy and you are the only one who's complaining. I am someone who really cares for others and tries to ensure that those around me feel supported and understood, and I found this comment very hurtful, and it showed me that those things were not being reciprocated. So even though I was in a group, I felt very alone at times. The next day, Barb was struggling with severe pain in her knees. She decided to bail off the mountain at the next exit point, and I decided to go with her. Partly because I was concerned about her well-being, and as her friend, I wasn't going to let her go alone. But also, I knew it was the right move for me, because I was going to be the next one in severe pain if I didn't. We made a quick plan for when and where to meet back up with the rest of the group on the other side of the mountain, said our goodbyes, and we dropped back down into the town of Idlewild. This is where we attempted and got our very first hitch. So hitchhiking, Mom, cover your ears. Hitchhiking is a very popular and necessary method of transportation from trail to town. sticking your thumb out while you look like a dirtbag, basically begging for a ride. It's so embarrassing, especially after car just continue to drive on past. But after that first time, hitching actually became one of my favorite parts of the trail. I would proudly stick out my thumb, put a big smile on my face, and I would wave as they drove past. After all, you catch more flies with honey, right? So once Barb and I got back into town, I took a good hard look at what I had in my pack. There's a saying amongst backpackers, don't pack your fears. It's so easy to pack things for every scenario and possibility. But when you do that, your pack weight can skyrocket in no time. I knew I had things that I could get rid of. I didn't really need my snow gaiters or my fleece pants. I didn't really need my beanie or my down mitts. What I did really need was to let that stuff go. So I did a good pack shakedown and sent a box of stuff home. Pivot. Getting back on trail just a few days later, I passed the 200-mile mark. We sang some songs, a common hiker coping mechanism to help save your sanity. And I heard, but did not see, my first rattlesnake. He was somewhere in the bushes ahead of me, rattling angrily, and we never did see him, so we gingerly took a wide berth around. A couple of us even found ourselves setting up camp under the I-10 freeway. Yes, to which my mom said, have fun.
I was really scared at that point.
It was loud and hot and uncomfortable and highly unsafe. And not something I would recommend to anyone. But am I glad I did it? Absolutely. These days were packed with a lot of fun and memorable moments. The next section of trail, the Whitewater Preserve to Wrightwood, was hands down one of my favorite 100 miles of the trail. On a personal level, I thrived in this section. But it was also the section where the cracks in our tramline really started to show, even though I think we all tried to pretend that they weren't. The Whitewater Preserve in Mission Creek was so much fun for me. I enjoy water crossings, and there were a ton of them in this area. There were a couple of deep and swift crossings, and then just hundreds of little ones as the trail weaved back and forth, slowly up and out of the canyon following Mission Creek.
Doing good. Yay, well done.
I experienced what hikers call getting your trail legs. So while everyone else struggled in this section, as there was a lot of climbing to do, I absolutely loved it. I thrived in it. My legs just flew up the climbs. I was able to do a 3-mile-an-hour pace, and I hit my very first 20-mile day and I was the first within our group to do so. I felt strong and powerful and proud. Just before Big Bear Lake, we hit another section of snow. I was by myself as I navigated my way through it. Because there was so much snow, the hikers that had been there before us couldn't see where the trail was, so they were just kind of guessing where to go. So there were tracks that led to nowhere, and some quite far off the actual trail. I ended up on 2 such tracks. One that fizzled out and had me about 15 feet below the actual trail on a steep slope of loose dirt. I could see it above me, and I had to basically scramble my way back up the slope to the trail above me. The other one just went straight down off the mountain. And once I was on it, I felt I had no choice but to continue following it because I'd lost sight of the actual trail. And I thought it would have been dangerous to try to return to it. I knew the tracks had to go somewhere. And eventually it popped me out onto a road at the bottom of the mountain, far northwest of where the trail actually was. I sent my brother a message that said, I know I'm not on the trail, but I'm pretty sure I'm not lost. So consulting with my navigation app called Far Out, I was able to determine that all I had to do was follow that road and the trail would eventually cross it. And it did. So I rejoined the trail and continued on. I was so proud of myself for being able to stay calm in both situations and successfully get myself out of them on my own. I was beginning to learn how capable and resourceful I really am. At the same time, as I was thriving in this section, again, as I said, the cracks were forming. We were starting to spend less time hiking together during the day as an actual group. My relationship with Barb was strained as we were both figuring out that what worked for us as hiking partners at home was not working for us on this trail. We were not out there with the same set of intentions, and we were beginning to want different things. As a group, we decided to take a day off in Big Bear Lake as there was a small winter storm approaching. There, Barb announced that she was thinking about ending her hike, that she wasn't happy and wasn't sure she wanted to continue. Heeding the hiker advice of don't quit on a bad day, she did choose to hike the next section, Big Bear to Wrightwood, and use that time to make a final decision. Also in Big Bear, Marie told me that she wanted to hike with me the entire rest of the way, just me and her, and yet at the same time decided to enter into a relationship with Luke. So as we left Big Bear, my head was spinning and my mind racing. My intuition was telling me that by the time we got to Wrightwood, I was going to be alone. My intuition was correct. Helena decided to stay behind in Big Bear. She had needed more rest, and then she would subsequently get off trail a week later. After telling me that she wanted to hike the rest of the trail with me, just 2 days later, Marie never hiked with me again. Her and Luke would always make sure to stay just far enough behind that we would never align with hiking together. And as she warned us, Barb decided to get off trail in Wrightwood, ending her hike and going home. I went from a tramily of 5 to being by myself in less than a week. So what else could I do but switch gears? Pivot. I decided to take 4 days of rest in Wrightwood. I rented a private Airbnb that Barb shared with me under the condition that I required quiet. I had not been alone since leaving home in late March. Even in your tent, you're not alone. You can still hear the people around you. The only time it's actually quiet is when you're sleeping. By this time, 35 days into the trail, I was in desperate need of a quiet space with no talking and no extra noise. And I needed this time to recharge and regroup and formulate a plan. I had known right from the beginning that Barb was not likely to do the entire trail. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Just knowing her, I thought it would be likely that the draws from home would call to her. Therefore, I was mentally prepared for her to leave at some point along the way. What I hadn't prepared for is how it would affect me emotionally. I had a big, strong group of hiking friends at home that I could always count on to be there. And so I didn't think that this through hike thing would be any different. I truly thought that I would meet someone who would be my person, my ride or die. That person who would hike the entire thing with me. But that hadn't happened yet. So when Barb decided to leave, mentally I agreed with her decision. Emotionally, I felt abandoned. Marie had also effectively ditched me, and I was incredibly hurt by that action. But I was also facing my next big challenge, which was Mount Baden-Powell, another 10,000-foot mountain full of epic snow. So I absolutely knew I could not enter this section alone. So I stuffed my feelings of hurt and abandonment and switched to the business of finding new people to hike with. Pivot. Chapter 3, Wrightwood to Tahachapi. Feelings buried alive, never die. Of all the wonderful people I had met over the last few weeks, I knew exactly who I wanted to attempt Baden-Powell with. Phil and Laura Brewer, aka Milkman and Hummingbird. When I saw them in Wrightwood and told them of my situation, they agreed to let me join them. They had quite a bit of snow experience themselves, and they both exuded confidence, so I was thrilled when they said that I could hike with them. we were to head back on trail the same morning that Barb would start her journey home. So her and I said our goodbyes. She headed to LA and I headed back to trail. With Baden Powell looming in my thoughts, I continued to stuff my emotions about losing my entire trail family. I had a job to do, and I couldn't afford the distraction of emotions and hurts. In a normal year, hikers would follow the nicely graded switchbacks all the way up this mountain. The PCT proper does not quite go to the peak, but many hikers choose to summit and then reconnect with the PCT on the other side. We, however, had an entirely different experience. We followed the switchbacks up for about maybe 3 to 4 switches, and then we hit a wall of snow. And I mean a wall of snow. There was no trail to be had, just the tops of the trees poking out through fields of snow for miles and miles. To get to the top, we would have to climb straight up. It basically went like this: ice axe, hiking pole, step, step. Ice axe, hiking pole, step, step. I quickly learned that none of my winter hiking experience was comparable to this, or helpful at all. This was a whole different ballgame. I also quickly realized that I was not going to be able to go back down the way that I had come. I had no choice but to keep going up. Surprisingly, that did not create any sense of panic, only resolution. By the time we got to the top, I was physically exhausted. It took every drop of energy and effort I had to get up there. My quads were on fire, my arms and legs shaky and weak, but we did it. We literally climbed up that mountain. And once again, I had that feeling of pride and amazement of what I could accomplish. As our excitement started to wear off, we now faced the daunting task of getting off the mountain. So we knew we couldn't backtrack off the summit to where the PCT was supposed to be, as it currently didn't exist, being buried beneath so much snow. We also saw no discernible boot tracks to follow. We knew that many hikers had been up there before us, and the reports on Far Out said, follow the established boot track. And the problem with that is there has to be one for you to follow. The sun was doing a great job of melting the top layers of snow so that within minutes of someone passing through, their tracks were completely gone. And honestly, if I had been up there alone, I probably would have just lived in that spot for the rest of my life. My instinct was to panic. I love hiking, but what I love about it is following a well-defined trail. I don't enjoy route finding. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. The only thing that kept me from full-on panic was the presence of Phil, and now also Magpie, another hiker, who, with his girlfriend Phoenix, joined us for the descent. I have always been the leader of any group I find myself in, and 95% of the time I'm the navigator. But in this moment, I was more than happy to let them take the reins on this one. I knew that if I looked at the map, I would freak out. So I chose to trust that the boys would get us off that mountain safely and in one piece. And they did, mostly. We ended up following ridgeline after ridgeline, avoiding the snow where we could. Subsequently, this meant summiting 3 to 4 extra mountains that day. Having precious little energy left, this did not help that situation. But doing this was leading us closer to our intended target for the night, Little Jimmy Campground. And the ridgeline hike itself wasn't too bad overall. The guys led and us girls followed. When we got within 2 miles of camp, we thought, okay, smooth sailing from here. We had descended a big section and landed in an area free of snow. We couldn't believe it. But the trail had other ideas, and our relief was short-lived, as was our expectation of smooth sailing. The last 2 miles took over 4 hours. Doing the math, that's half a mile an hour. It was rough. 2 things happened to me in those final 2 miles that tested my spirit. First, I took a hard fall during a descent. We were in an area that was a little free of snow, but also had a thin layer of dirt over a smooth rock going down. The slope was too long to take an actual step down, so we had to kind of half slide. My left foot caught and stuck while my right foot continued to slide. So down I went, and the weight of my pack twisted me around as I fell a few feet before Phil was able to catch me. I felt my back tweak, and I immediately knew I would need to see a chiropractor. Problem there being, we were still 2 weeks away from a town even big enough to have a chiropractor. The second thing that happened, not too much later, was an unfortunate incident with my ice axe. We were on a narrow ledge, covered in snow, similar to that, and we had to step up and around a large boulder. We had our ice axes out for safety in case we slipped off the ledge. Phil and Magpie had gone up and over the boulder first, but when it came to my turn, I didn't have enough strength left in me to take that big step up without a little help. So I put my left hand on the boulder for support, ice axe hanging down, and just hanging into the air. Magpie pulled me up with my right hand. As he pulled, I put all my weight on my right foot and brought my left leg up to take that next step, forgetting that my ice axe was hanging there.
Oh.
I jammed my left quad muscle right into the pick of my axe. Everyone gasped in horror as they watched me stab myself. Magpie immediately said, "It wasn't me!" And I, having a strong tendency to faint in situations like this, I tried to remain calm, keep breathing, and I simply said to him, "I know, that was my fault." And to Phil, I said, "When we get to wider ground, I think we're gonna need to take a look at that." We all carried on in shock, my leggings getting soaked with blood. Phil and I stopped when it was safer to do so to tend to my injury. To my surprise, I didn't faint, but I did start to cry, both because of what had happened and with relief that it wasn't as bad as we both anticipated it might be. I was incredibly lucky. No stitches, no infection, no damage to the muscle. Just an impressive flesh wound that left me with a pretty cool star-shaped scar with bullseye in the middle, right on my leg. It's a lifelong souvenir from the PCT. I can laugh about it now, but in the moment, that was the last straw for my day. By the time we got to camp, I was absolutely physically, mentally, and emotionally shattered. We found a small snow-free clearing that just fit all our tents. I set up my tent, changed into my warm night clothes, and cried. All the emotions of the previous month, all the unrealized expectations, all the hurts, the frustrations, disappointments, bubbled up and spilled out. Feelings buried alive never die. They fester and build and eventually break through. It took a while, but I finally crawled out of my tent, received big hugs from my new little family, and we got back to the business at hand, dinner. The five of us would continue to hike and camp together all the way to the town of Acton. I grew to love the four of them and really connected with Magpie and Phoenix. Sadly though, our family of five would only be for that one section of trail. Magpie and Phoenix had started the trail in March, and like many of the March starters, they'd been bouncing back and forth looking for snow-free areas. So they were only in that area now because they had skipped it earlier. So once we got to Acton, they jumped north to continue their journey. Despite my best efforts to convince them to stay and hike it again, we said a tearful goodbye and wished each other well. I also parted ways with Phil and Laura in Acton. My experience on Baden Powell had broken me. My spirit had been damaged that day, and honestly, I never really recovered from it. While my legs seemed to be doing fine, my back continued to hurt a little bit more every day. I decided I needed an extra day off to rest while Phil and Laura carried on. I knew that staying behind in Acton would mean that I would be hiking alone for real for the first time, and I convinced myself I was excited about it. For the first time, I'd be able to make all my own decisions without having to compromise or take anyone else into consideration. I felt rested, I had new shoes, and I was ready to go. I started out strong and confident, but before long, my feet began to hurt so bad. My legs began to hurt as well. Lactic acid seemed to be building up in them as I climbed. It hurt to move, but it hurt more to stop. As my body began to rebel against hiking, my mental stability crumbled. I had only planned to go 8 miles that day, from Acton to the small town of Acton, and it was the longest 8 miles of my life. I cried, like sobbing crying, for probably 5 of those 8 miles. Being in that much physical pain and being alone, feeling like there was no one around me that actually wanted to hike with me, I just became a puddle of sadness and tears. I really felt like the PCT was going to win this one. I was an emotional and mental wreck. I decided to get in contact with another hiker I knew was behind me, Yahtzee. He's a strong Christian man and someone I felt could possibly restore some of my faith, and he was only 1 day behind me. He agreed that I could hike with him to Tahachapi, so I waited in Acton for him. I spent the next week with Yahtzee, and again felt this strange mix of conflicted feelings. I remarked at how was it that I could feel so strong while simultaneously feel like I was breaking apart. Yahtzee was really good for me. He pushed me, encouraged me, and together we achieved our first 10 by 10 miles before 10 a.m. Together we pushed 18 to 20 mile days, that's 28 to 32 kilometers, back to back. Together we crossed the 500 mile mark. I grew so much in that week, and yet at the same time, my body was falling apart. My feet hurt so bad. I would be in near tears whenever we would stop from the intense throbbing nerve pain. My back grew increasingly painful as well, day by day. And by the time we got to Tahachapi, I was a hobbling mess. Physically, I had reached a level of pain I knew I couldn't push through any longer. The mind can only take so much before it breaks. Emotionally, I was broken too. Relationally, I had not made the strong connections that I thought I would. And while I had a lot of friends, I didn't belong to any of them. I didn't belong anywhere. I felt very alone and defeated. PCT was winning this round, but I wasn't quite ready to surrender yet. Chapter 4. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. Do you know that song? No. So once again, in Tahachapi, I made a decision to stay behind. Phil, Laura, and Yahtzee all took a brief rest before moving on to the final 140 miles of the desert section. I knew I couldn't go, not yet. Upon arriving to town, I called my mom crying. Mom knows that if I'm crying, things are bad. I had never called her from the trail crying before, so she knew things were not going well. Aside from being in pain and being alone, I was now also facing another dilemma. What to do when I reached the end of the desert? I was only 140 miles from Kennedy Meadows, the gateway to the High Sierra, and the unprecedented snowpack, which had not really melted at all yet. So every single hiker was facing the same problem, what to do. And everyone had a different solution, causing a mass scattering of hikers that has been unheard of in any other year. I thought my best plan was to take some time off, to let the snow melt a little more, and then skip ahead somewhere in Northern California, basically just skipping over the High Sierra section. But where was I going to go during this time off, and who with? I was very stressed out about this, which wasn't helping my mental state. So Mom decided that she would fly down, very generously, to California and spend 2 weeks with me as I waited out the snow. Having that decided on, I felt much better, and I could focus on the next issue at hand. What was I going to do about my broken body? The shoes I was wearing had to go. There was no way I could continue to keep hiking in them. They were absolutely destroying my feet. So I ordered a new pair, a different brand, with more support and cushion. That done, I focused on what to do about my back. So as I've mentioned before, I am a Christian, and what happened next in my mind can only be described as divine intervention. I called every single chiropractor listed in the Tahachapi area. Only one number out of all of them actually worked, and that was for Dr. Bill. All of the other phone numbers came back as incorrect or disconnected. Unfortunately, Diane, Bill's wife, informed me that they were completely booked up for the day that I had asked for, and she asked if I could come in for on a different day. Explaining to her that I was a PCT hiker and only in town for that one day, I went on to tell her what had happened and the shape I was in. And she said, "I'm going to talk to Bill and I will call you back." A few minutes later, she called back and said that I could come in for the last appointment of the day, 8 p.m. I was thrilled. Upon arriving for my appointment, I discovered that they were Christians themselves. The last appointment of the day was a couple, also Christians. They began to ask me all about the PCT and my hike and my life. Ken and Gina, the couple, they allowed me to go before them because I had a trail angel waiting to give me a ride back to my hotel. And Dr. Bill gave me an adjustment. But that is far from all that happened. Ken and Gina paid for my appointment, and then Gina gave me her phone number and said, "If for any reason at all you find you need a place to stay, we have a private guest house and you're welcome to use it." I left that appointment absolutely floored by their kindness and generosity. I was a complete stranger to them. They didn't need to fit me in for an appointment, much less offer me anything else. Spirits lifted. I decided the next day I was going to return to the trail and push through the last 140 miles of the desert. And I made it exactly 3 miles. My back hurt so bad that every step was a struggle, and at one point I nearly fainted. I began to realize I wasn't going to make it. I thought that I could continue that day and force myself to keep going, and I would do it. But would I wake up the next morning and be able to walk at all? Would I end up in a position where I would have to hit the SOS button on my Garmin and get airlifted out because I couldn't move? I sat down on the side of the mountain I was on and cried again. Once let loose on Baden Powell, I felt like I'd been doing nothing but crying ever since. I called my mom from where I sat and got her opinion of my situation, which was turn around and go back to town. I knew that was the right call, but man, did that break my heart. I was only 140 miles from finishing the desert, the first major milestone, and I had to stop. I felt completely defeated. My confidence was shattered. The joy of hiking was completely gone. I could hardly believe I was even saying those words to my mom. I love hiking more than anything in life, and here I was saying the words, "This isn't fun anymore." And yet when Mom asked, "Do you want me to book you a flight home?" without a second's hesitation, my answer was a horrified no. It was looking like my hike might likely be over, but I was not yet ready to admit that kind of defeat. I might have been knocked down, but I knew I wanted some time to see if I could get back up again. Pivot. I hobbled my way back to town, went to the hospital where I was informed that I had sprained my spine, much like you would sprain an ankle. The solution to that, at least 4 weeks of rest. That news sucked. Being ordered off your feet is one of the hardest pills to swallow for a hiker. But it could not have come at better time, since I was going to have to take some time off to let the snow melt anyway. Mom rebooked her flight so that she would arrive a week earlier than we originally planned. I called Diane and Dr. Bill and told them I was back in town and could I please have another appointment. And then I called Gina and asked if she really meant what she said about their guest house. And then I messaged my friend Jody, whom I had never met in person but connected with online, to see if I could stay with her for a week in Reno before returning to the trail in Chester. They all said yes. My 4 weeks off planned out in less than a day. Divine intervention. That news could have easily ended my journey, as I would never have been able to afford that kind of time off if I hadn't received so much help. Ken and Gina took really good care of me while I stayed with them for free. Dr. Bill saw me 3 more times for free, as he did his best to help fix my back. And then I stayed with Jody in Reno for a week for free. Their generosity still blows me away. That they would help a stranger with no expectation of repayment Other than I do my best to continue my journey, they restored my faith in humanity. Mom and I spent a delightful 2 weeks in St. George, Utah at an Airbnb in a sportsplex. We did the tourist things. We went to Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon, Snow Canyon, and we did some light walking to see what I could handle. I spent a lot of time resting and walking in the pool and soaking in the hot tub. By the time Mom had to go home, I was feeling a lot better. I flew to Reno and spent another amazing week with Jody and her husband Aiden, preparing for my return to the trail. During the 4 weeks I took off, while resting and healing my battered body, I also took some time to reflect on the previous 2 months and try to heal my battered soul. I came to understand a few basic things that I would take forward with me into part 2 of my journey. First thing was I had spent much of the hike thus far desperately trying to force my expectations to come true. I had had this vision of being part of this big happy trail family, and that I would have formed solid connections and amazing friendships. And while I had made friendships, I had not formed that solid bond that I was looking for. And while I had been in a large family, they were not the right fit for me. I had ignored that in my desperate attempt to create my vision and stayed with them rather than be alone, which ended up happening anyway. I also realized that I needed to be around low-key, calmer energy. High-energy people are a lot of fun, but they're also very exhausting to me. And being in an environment where I couldn't get away from them to recharge in a lower energy space had totally drained me. I knew this was going to be important going forward and something I needed to be cognizant of. Something else I became aware of is that I had been holding on to a lot of hurt around how I ended up being alone. Marie had never offered any explanation or apology for ditching me. I believed she was just hiking her own hike, oblivious to the effect her actions had on me. That wound festered in my soul. But then God whispered in my ear and said, "She didn't ditch you. I removed her." And with that comforting knowledge, I was able to let go of some of that resentment, and I began to be thankful rather than upset. I was reminded that I needed to focus on my relationship with God and that what it was He wanted me to see and experience, and focus less on forcing relationships. Pivot. And lastly, I needed a new trail name. A trail name is your identity. It's who you are on trail. It's a fun name usually given to you by someone else for something you did, said, or are. Since about the first week on trail, I had been going by the name of Lifesaver, which I loved initially. Marie had bestowed the name on me for 2 reasons. One, because I had a colorful pack and then those beautiful colored shorts. So I looked like a pack of Lifesaver candies. And 2, because I was her personal lifesaver. When she joined us, I had planned out our first couple of weeks. I had the hotels booked, the travel arrangements made. I planned out how far we would go in a day, pick out our campsites, etc. All she had to do was hike. All the decisions made for her. Lifesaver. I loved it in the beginning because I saw it as a good thing, being helpful and allowing life to be easier for others by doing something I'm good at anyway, planning and organizing. It just felt good. But as time went on, I had begun to see that while I gave to everyone, no one had given back to me. So I felt like my kindness had been taken advantage of, and the name took on a negative connotation for me, and I didn't want to be associated with it any longer. I let go of my expectations, and I focused on allowing what will be to be. I was going to be headed back on trail alone, this time purposefully and mentally prepared for it. I was ready. The trail may have knocked me down, but I got up again, and I will forever be thankful I did not let it keep me down and that I did not quit. Pivot, my new trail name. Part 2, Northern California. Chapter 5, dreams really do come true, but why does the PCT want to kill me? So even with taking a month off trail, the snow levels in the Sierra were still too high for me to contemplate attempting, especially by myself. So when it came time to return to the trail, Jody dropped me off at the trailhead just outside of the town of Chester, which is approximately the halfway point of the trail. Jody gave me a hug, said, "You've got this," and then drove away. I threw my pack on and walked away from the highway, heading into a new adventure by myself, but content and at peace with that, ready to spend the next few months with myself, with God, and what He wanted me to see and experience. I was confident but cautious. My back felt significantly better, but I also knew I would have to be careful and diligent in taking care of my body from here on out. Stretching every night became a part of my daily routine. And I specifically chose to start from Chester because it was relatively flat from there to the town of Belden. And I figured flat was probably a pretty good way to start off after being off for a month. I was a couple of days in, really enjoying myself on the trail for the first time since the very beginning, settling into a routine of hiking for myself when I received a message from Leonie. I had met Leonie prior to the trail. She had started 2 days after me, but we had never managed to hike together. She had also taken a month off trail and had returned just a couple days before me. Her message was simple: "How long will it take you to get to Belden?" I told her probably 3 days. Her reply was, "I will wait for you there. I hate hiking alone." I laughed and said, "I can totally relate. See you when I get there." Leonie and I had similar experiences with our trail families in the desert. She had not found a good connection with anyone long-term either, and was struggling to find the motivation to keep going. We decided to hike at least one section together, see how we got on, and go from there. Having both had similar issues and experiences, we were able to be honest with each other about what we were looking for in a partner, how we wanted to hike, and agreed that if it wasn't a good fit for either, we would just say so and move on. Turns out, Leonie and I were two peas in a pod, with similar energy levels, similar hiking styles, similar ideas on how far we wanted to go each day, and when we wanted to get up in the morning, and what time we wanted to make camp by. It was a match made in heaven. By the end of our first day, we both knew we had found the connection we had both grievously been missing. It was not lost on me that as soon as I stopped seeking this kind of connection, there it was. Leonie and I had so much fun together. We would set up camp on old abandoned roads or hike off trail to beautiful lakes that we could go swim in. We would stop to soak our feet in various creeks and either play in or give an evil eye to any snow we came across. And we would stop at the top of all the big climbs to take a moment to soak it all in. With her, I could be silly and make jokes and be my naturally happy, positive self. I could also philosophize and talk about deep, meaningful things, and not once did she think I was being weird or dumb. And when I was having a rough day, I could scream, cry, grumble, and complain, and she never made me feel bad for doing so. In fact, we were often in sync with our feelings, and we would let out a cathartic scream together. Not once did I feel any judgment coming from her, only complete acceptance. I've not found that in very many people throughout my life, on or off the trail. Leonie is one of those people. When asked what my favorite part of the journey was, my answer is a broad, all-encompassing Northern California. NorCal has my heart, and I think for the simple reason that NorCal is where I fell in love and felt loved. I fell in love with the trail, the pure difficulty of it, the California heat, the sunrises, the lakes, the bees, the cows, and even the gigantic blowdowns. I also fell in love with 4 amazing human beings who all loved and accepted me simply for being me. I finally felt like I belonged. Those 4 humans were Leonie, Moneybags, Sunshine, and Woodsy. Their presence in my life dramatically increased my level of happiness and joy on the trail. Where the desert was full of hard lessons, feelings of sadness, loneliness, and defeat, NorCal was light, love, and joy. I loved every minute of NorCal, and even even though the PCT continued to try and kill me every day. Not succeeding in completely breaking me with physical or emotional pain, the PCT switched up tactics again, this time by turning up the dial on the daily physical demands of the trail. We encountered long, rocky climbs, often augmented by huge blowdowns that were challenging to get over or get around. When the trail wasn't rocky, it was littered with a sea of blowdowns that would last for miles, slowing our pace down considerably. And then there was the heat. 35 to 40 degree heat with precious little shade. We would often find ourselves in large burn zones. Unlike most, Leonie and I did not subscribe to the idea of afternoon siestas. Many hikers will take a long break in the afternoon, hiding in some shade, usually between 11 to 3 or 4 in the afternoon, but then hike well into the night to make up for it. Our daily rhythm was to get up early, complete 80% of our miles before lunch, and then take our time straggling into camp by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, taking 15 to 20-minute breaks every 2 miles or so. We would then enjoy being at camp as the cooler air started to roll in around 6 or 7 p.m. This made more sense to us rather than wasting the entire day taking a siesta when the heat didn't subside till well past 4 o'clock anyway. This was how we actually got to enjoy our lives, the rivers, the lakes, and our camps. We began to see woodsy, moneybags, and sunshine on and off throughout our days. We would often set up camp at the base of a big climb, and they would all carry on and then remark the next day how we had it right. Eventually, they started camping with us. Aside from describing NorCal as where I found love, it's also where I developed a strong sense of perseverance and determination. I'm not kidding when I say it felt like the PCT was trying to kill us every day. I can't even accurately describe how it felt to hike in that kind of environment, except to say that you either develop the perseverance to keep going or you lay down and die. You either gained a fierce determination to conquer the day, and the next day, and the next day, or you would get to town and never go back on trail. It was hard. Every day was a test of your willpower. I had already learned how the PCT likes to trip you up and knock you down, and I was determined that it was not going to get the best of me in any way in NorCal. I won that round with flying colors. It was in NorCal that I learned just how much I can really do, just how much I can withstand, and how much drive to succeed I really have. NorCal made me a super hiker, something that Leonie and Lizzie would dub beast mode. I began to absolutely thrive in the heat and the big, hard, challenging climbs. To me, it was invigorating and dirty and sweaty. I had never in my life been so absolutely disgusting. I began to love seeing how filthy I could get on any given day, and I would feel disappointed if I was cleaner than I was the day before. Dirt, soot, and sweat, legs, feet, hands, face, absolutely covered. Not showering for days at a time, it was amazing. Being dirty was so freeing, and I embraced being a dirtbag and being hiker trash. I loved it.
It's been a bad one.
Our time in NorCal seemed to fly by, as time does when you're having fun. Some of my most favorite town days happened in this section of trail as well. Because Leonie and I were on the same page about almost everything, and because our energies and personalities matched and complemented each other, town days were no longer a source of stress. They became what they were supposed to be all along. Time to get chores done and then relax. I actually began to enjoy being in town, feeling like now I had the time to get everything done in a methodical, non-chaotic way. We would get to town, immediately grab some food, set about getting our chores done, and then spend the rest of the time relaxing, touring the town, or getting to know our trail friends a little bit better. One of our mutual favorite stops was in the small town of Etna. We stayed in a small old Victorian-style house turned into a hotel. 6 rooms in total, 1 shared bathroom, communal kitchen, and living room space. The kitchen was the best part. Leonie and I hit the grocery store, bought supplies for a taco salad for lunch, and then, having made way too much, we invited Moneybags and Sunshine to join us for supper. This is where we really got to know these 2 guys, and the 4 of us simply hit it off. Being in the somewhat older crowd of hikers, the 4 of us would often have deep philosophical conversations, revel in what it meant to all of us individually and collectively. We were a foursome of deep thinkers and playmakers, always having fun at the top of the list. After Etna, while not formally a tramily yet, the 5 of us, me, Leonie, Moneybags, Sunshine, and Woodsy, we did start to camp together. By the time we got to Syed Valley, we had formed a bond. The trials and tribulations of the trail does that to you. We decided in Syed Valley that we would hike as a tramily for our next section of trail, which for Leonie and I was meant to be as far as the Oregon border. Leonie had been struggling with homesickness even prior to us joining forces. My being with her was a good distraction, and it gave her motivation to keep going, but it was still always there. At our town stop in Mount Shasta a few weeks prior, she broached the subject of timing, how far we had left to hike, and how long it was going to take us. We had developed a comfortable pace of 15 to 20 miles a day. Anything over 20 miles and we stopped enjoying ourselves. During my time off after the desert, I decided that lower miles equaled more enjoyment, which was more important to me now than doing the entire trail. By going more than 20 miles a day, I would stop paying attention to my surroundings. I would stop enjoying being in the moment and would only focus on putting one foot in front of the other, just getting the miles in. Head down, missing it all. I had witnessed so many other hikers get caught in that trap, and I was determined not to be one of them. But that meant we had some decisions to make. I was adamant I was going to finish the remainder of California. Having missed some other major milestones, I wanted to see the California-Oregon border sign. And I wanted to make it to the northern terminus and then walk back into Canada. What we did in between to make that happen was less absolute for me. We did the math, and with our current pace and average town stop days, it was going to take us early to mid-October to finish the rest of the trail. Time wasn't on our side. As Canadians, we only have 6 months to complete the trail, but also winter is unpredictable in the Cascade Mountains of Washington. Leonie and I both felt uncomfortable pushing our journey into October. So we made a plan to go as far as the Oregon border and then skip up to Washington. Pivot. So it was bittersweet when we finally joined forces with Sunshine and Moneybags, knowing it was going to be short-lived. Leaving Syed Valley, we only had a few days to the border. As we set out, we initially had Woodsy with us as well, but he had to turn back within the first mile due to an injured foot. We said a sad goodbye to him, believing that we would never likely see him again. The other 4 of us continued together, enjoyed one of my most favorite weeks on trail. We sang, we laughed, we danced.
The hills are alive with the sound of music. Oh.
And we shared stories, many of them told by Sunshine, who told great tales that we were never quite sure if they were true or not. But it didn't matter. He was a captivating storyteller. At one day out from the California-Oregon border, I received a message on my phone from the trail angel who was to pick us up at the border. She messaged to say that she was no longer going to be picking us up from there. She didn't want to drive that road anymore. That left us in a bit of a pickle, and we were both quite annoyed. First, we were lucky that I had even had cell service where we happened to be, because we hadn't had any for a few days. If I had not received that message, we would have been stuck there. Also, we only packed enough food to get us to the border. We were going to be 3 days shy of having enough food to make it to the town of Ashland on foot. After debating our options and ruling out any of her other suggested pickup points because they didn't benefit us in any way, we talked it out with Sunshine and Moneybags, and they promised not to let us starve. We would hike all the way to Ashland with them, and they would supplement our dwindling supplies from their own food stocks. Pivot. In hindsight, that lady canceling on us turned out to be a blessing. We got to share the amazing moment of hiking on into Oregon with the guys. And we got to be a family for a few days longer. We met Moneybags' wife in Ashland, and we got to spend more precious time with them before we continued our journey north. Woodsy also managed to catch up with us while we were still in Ashland, and we had a big family reunion there. We had teased all the guys that they should skip ahead with us. They all said no, they wanted to do Oregon, which we totally understood. I was sad though. Leonie and I had made this decision before meeting these guys. Had we met them already, I don't know that I would have made the same choice. I have no regrets about my journey, but this one choice did and still does give me some pause. What would it have been like to complete the trail with all our guys? As it was time to say goodbye and continue on the next step of our journey. Part 3, Washington. Chapter 6, Testing My Will to Live. Leonie and I rented a car to drive from Ashland to Portland, and then we hopped on a bus to Cascade Locks, where our Washington adventure would begin. I think we both had mixed feelings about what we were about to do. Having left the guys and jumped ahead by a whole month of hiking, we knew no one in our new orbit. We were entering a whole different environment from California, and we were so close to home, but still so far. We didn't know what to expect, and boy did Washington keep us on our toes. We knew there would be new challenges to face, and we didn't know how many there would be. First up, getting across the Bridge of the Gods. I was not worried about it at all. I don't have a fear of heights. I knew the bridge was safe, and even though you must walk across it into oncoming traffic with no pedestrian lane, it's still safe. It's also graded, meaning you can see all the way along down into the mighty Columbia River flowing beneath it. All of this made Leonie very apprehensive, as she suffers with vertigo, and everything about it made her head spin and her stomach lurch. Wanting to get across it as fast as possible, but being forced to go slow because of her vertigo, we probably hold the record for the longest Bridge of the Gods crossing in PCT history. It took forever. But we made it across together and celebrated our official entry into Washington. We crossed the highway, located the trailhead, and we were immediately swallowed up by the green tunnel that is the thick forest of Washington. After 4 months in the arid desert spaces of California, I was so excited to be back in the land of lush greenery and live trees everywhere. I was thrilled about the soft dirt beneath my feet. I reveled in it for about a day. And then reality hit. No longer were we going to have wide open views for days and days. No longer were we going to hike hard up a big climb and be rewarded with miles upon miles of spectacular sights. No longer were we going to be warm, much less hot. Washington is cold. I was not expecting this drastic change in temperature. I'd gotten so used to always feeling the warmth of the sun-kissed air on my skin. Even the breezes were warm, leaving you cool but never cold. Not in Washington. Even with temperatures in the high 30s, being under the canopy of all the trees and surrounding thick greenery, the air temperature was at least 10 degrees cooler than it was in the sun, if not more. I quickly got into the habit of hiking in my t-shirt and shorts because while moving, I would still work up a sweat and get hot. But the second I stopped moving, I would freeze. So I would pull out my puff jacket and put my wind pants on. I missed being warm, something fierce. My infatuation with the forest quickly left me. There is something really rewarding about pushing yourself to get to the top of a big climb, when you know there will be an amazing view for you to see when you get there. When you get to the top of a Washington climb, only to be rewarded with more trees and no views, the only feeling that it can be described as, For the first entire week of Washington, we had maybe 5 minutes of views for all that hard work we had to do. Throw in being cold, it's highly unfair. For all its struggles and pushing you to earn your keep, California really had spoiled us. We also learned that Washington never got the memo that from the trail makers that they were supposed to throw in switchbacks. Most of the climbs in the first 2 weeks are very reminiscent of an Albertan or BC trail, straight up, then straight down. There were days we would hike 18 miles, 9 miles up, 9 miles down, no miles in between. Those are called PUDs, pointless ups and downs. Why make us climb all the way up the top of the mountain just to go straight back down with no view at the top? Washington was making no sense. Another thing we noticed was a drastic change from California was the social interactions between groups of people. For those headed south, if they were in a group, you could bet they had originally been going north. They were called snowboers or flip-floppers. For those going south that were alone, they were the true southbounders. Out of those of us still going north, Leonie and I found it very difficult to make connections with new people around us. Many did not want to stop and talk at all. Many we would see once and never see again. It became very apparent that while California was all about socialization and forming your groups, Washington was about getting the job done. Must accomplish the mission. We started to joke that we were not good through hikers because we were obviously not doing it right. Once again, though, I kind of felt sad for the other hikers. We saw caught in this trap of just pushing miles. But hike your own hike. I had been really excited for Washington, but honestly, I felt a little let down by it. It's never a good thing to compare, and I know this, but I couldn't seem to help it. California was all the things that Washington was not. I still don't know if it was just that Washington was so much like home for me, so it didn't hold the same appeal that it does for others, or the fact that I had learned so much and have overcome so much in California that it will just forever hold my heart. Whatever it was, for a state that I had been looking forward to the most, I just wasn't really feeling it. And maybe that's the issue right there. Another example of how expectations are premeditated resentments or disappointments. Finally, after a couple weeks in Washington, we entered the Goat Walks Wilderness and some views. I had been looking forward to this section so much. It looked so beautiful in the pictures and videos I had seen. Everyone absolutely raves about it and the famous knife's edge. The knife's edge is what it sounds like. It's a very narrow ribbon of trail that follows the tops of a 2-mile-long ridgeline going from peak to peak to peak before dropping back down into a valley on the other side. It's gorgeous. But what most people fail to mention is just how steep, just how narrow, and just how rocky it is. Therefore, how incredibly dangerous it is. Thrill seekers can't talk it up enough. It truly is the best part of the PCT for them. For two individuals who love hiking but don't particularly enjoy high level risk taking, one with severe vertigo and the other one with basophobia, a healthy fear of falling from heights. This was not our most favorite moment on trail. The miles leading up to the knife's edge were absolutely spectacular. Our first real views of anything in Washington thus far. It was stunning, with some fall colors already starting to appear here and there. We climbed up over a pass and gradually descended down the other side, sweeping along the side of the mountain. The final push up to the knife's edge was very rocky. It looked like we were on the moon. It's definitely where the rocks part of Goat Rocks Wilderness comes from. Once at the knife's edge, the PCT proper goes along the side of a mountain of shale, gradually making its way up to the top of the ridge, where it then hugs the knife's point of the ridgeline. To get there, though, we would have to traverse over 3 large snowfields. Having been given bad intel about the remaining snow in Washington, we had sent home our ice axes and our microspikes. We had had enough of dealing with sketchy snow situations and did not fancy trying to traverse through it without any sort of winter gear on our feet or in our hands. Our other option was to take the old snowy alternate route, which basically went straight up to the top of the mountain right away, rather than gradually getting there. This meant 2 things. 1, we would skip the snow traverses, but 2, it meant we would be on the narrow ledges for longer. Both options sucked. But we chose to go the old snowy route, and I couldn't help but laugh at the irony that we were taking old snowy trail to avoid the snow. Climbing up was the best part. I enjoyed all the big rocks and the feelings of being on top of the world. But once we got up there, it didn't take long for my stomach to drop as we looked ahead and saw just how steep and sketchy the trail was and how far into the distance it went. Like, way over there. It looked never ending. Leonie instantly panicked. She had been a trooper, always facing her vertigo with grace, just pushing through the areas that bothered her. If I was ahead of her, I learned what areas I could stop in, which areas I shouldn't stop in, when to just let her go in front of me, and when to encourage her to look out at the views. But this was a whole other ballgame. It was intimidating and looked scary. She froze, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "I can't do this." Knowing we had no choice but to do it, I said to her, "Don't look at it. Don't look at the whole thing. Just focus on the 2 feet in front of you. You only need to go that far, just 2 feet forward." So she was able to collect herself, and slowly we started to move forward. A few hundred feet, I looked up and looked out at the expanse and had my own panic attack. I froze and said, "Oh my God, I can't do this. I mean, look at it." She looked at me and she said, "You're the one who just told me not to look at it." We had a good nervous laugh at that. I took a few deep breaths and we continued on. I had made the unfortunate miscalculation of when to get new shoes. Shoes only last about 350 miles on the trail before your grip is usually so worn down it does nothing for you. I had sent new shoes to White Pass, our next town stop, on the other side of the knife's edge. So there I was, descending down the steepest, narrowest section of trail with scree, loose dirt and gravel, in shoes with no grip. Let me tell you, that was not fun. It took us 4 hours to go 2 miles. Again. And it was nerve-wracking. With every single step, I would repeat this mantra in prayer. God, give me strong, sturdy, solid steps. Strong, sturdy, solid steps. Over and over. It was the only thing that kept my own panic at bay. That and Leonie's constant reassurance. She had also learned about me and what triggers my fears. She knew that any kind of slippy, slidey surface on a downslope freaked me out. My fear of falling from heights also includes any time the ground beneath my feet does not feel stable or solid. Every time we got into an area she knew would trigger me, she would stop and turn around and say, "You got this." And I would be able to take a deep breath and do it. Leonie and I had already bonded and had been there for each other every day of our journey together. But this day was different. It was special. Together, we both faced our greatest fears, helped, encouraged, and supported each other through it, and celebrated how scary it was and how amazing and strong we were. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of unconditional support and total acceptance of my weaknesses and celebration for overcoming them from anyone else ever. It really proved to me that it matters who you were with and the headspace that you're in. The difficulty of this day was quite akin to the difficulty of Mount Baden-Powell. But yet Mount Baden-Powell had left me broken, where the knife's edge turned me into a badass woman. I didn't like it, not one bit, but it is one of those moments in my journey that I look back on with incredible pride. Washington continued to only progressively get harder from that point on. I would say that it was never NorCal hard, in the sense that NorCal had more obstacles to contend with in the addition to the hard climbing. It had heat, blowdowns, burn zones, all things that Washington had remarkably very little of. But where NorCal filled me with the determination and perseverance, Washington tested my will to live every single day. Many hikers get the NorCal blues. For some reason, people find it kind of boring and a letdown after the Sierra. I believe I had the benefit of seeing how incredibly special it is, having not gone through the Sierra. And it was an amazing training ground for what I was facing in Washington. Because without that determination and perseverance, Washington just might have won that round. Not having the same reward system at the top of a climb made the hard climbing that much harder mentally. And somehow, we ended up with a series of days where we would climb in the morning, go down in the afternoon, but then have a seriously steep climb right before camp, leaving us exhausted, and as I said, lacking the willingness to live. I felt like I was going to die from exhaustion every day for a good couple of weeks. I could have given in, and some days I sure wanted to. Luckily, I had my own inner drive and unwillingness to quit, but I also had 2 hiking partners who shared in the misery with me. There were times I didn't feel like continuing. I wouldn't want to do it for my own sake, but I would do it for theirs. Chapter 7, The Return of Woodsy. You heard me right, 2 hiking partners. The day after the Knife's Edge, Leonie and I made our way out of the Goat Rocks wilderness, where it was raining and where we did not see a single mountain goat. Very disappointing. It was a wet, miserable day, and we could not wait to see the Goat Rocks in our rear view mirror and get to White Pass, where we had planned to take a 0 day. When we arrived at White's Pass, I received a message on my phone with a surprise. Woodsy, who was supposed to be somewhere in Oregon, was in Packwood, about 30 miles away. He had gotten lonely in Oregon, had reconsidered his reasons for being there, and decided to take us up on our suggestion that he skip ahead and hike with us. So instead of zeroing in White Pass, which is basically just a gas station on the side of the highway and not much else, we collected our resupply packages and caught a quick hitch into Packwood. We had an awesome reunion with Woodsy and filled him in on all our tales of Washington thus far. The addition of Woodsy changed our group dynamics a lot. Being the only boy with 2 girls created some issues regarding accommodations on town days, generated the need for a little more creativity when checking out the geography, a term we fondly picked up from Sunshine and Moneybags, meaning going for a bathroom break. And it reduced our one-on-one girl time that Leonie and I had gotten used to and enjoyed. But it also added a lot of chatter while hiking, on breaks, and at camp, and everywhere in between. Woodsy, as it turns out, is quite a chatterbox. It was a side of him that we didn't see in NorCal. Interested in just about any topic, knowledgeable about the forest and everything in it, he could and would discuss literally anything. He was a great addition for adding spark to our days and playing trail games and keeping us on our toes. Woodsy is also oddly informed about all things Canada. It's kind of eerie how much he knew, so we decided he could be an honorary Canadian. It wasn't all sunshine and roses though. Woodsy and I had our trials together. For all that I enjoyed having him around and the life he brought to the party, I was as equally annoyed and irritated with him. And I feel free saying this because he knew it. We butted heads a lot. To say we have a love-hate relationship would be pretty accurate. All 3 of us would cycle through this wheel of enjoying each other, to being irritated by each other, to having a spat to clear the air, bring us back to enjoying each other, just to have the cycle continue. It was a weird dynamic. But what I did appreciate about the addition of Woodsy was that I was learning about myself, my boundaries, my abilities to hold them, and the value of fighting for some friendships. It would have been easy to simply say that it wasn't working having him with us and to request that he not hike with us anymore. I think in the normal world, it's easier to write people off and just not put in any time or effort. But on the trail, when you're so isolated and people and connections are at a premium, it's not that simple. For all that he frustrated me, I knew there was a reason he was with us. I still wanted him to be there and be part of my journey, and for me to be part of his. We just had to find a way to stop annoying each other. Woodsy and I shared many conversations, arguments, and tears trying to work it out, and eventually we got there. Woodsy has turned out to be one of my most favorite people, and probably the one I keep in contact with the most now. He's been vital to my mental health upon returning home, because no one else can really relate aside from another thru hiker. And we share similar stories about what led us to the trail and how we pictured our lives to be afterwards. I consider him now to be one of my most cherished friends. Pivot. The three of us continued to make our way north, maintaining our 15 to 20 mile a day progression, with a couple of exceptions. Just before Chinook Pass, it had been a particularly grueling morning. By 3 p.m., we had gone only about 8 miles, and we came across the beautiful Dewey Lake. It was a large, blue-green, and unusually warm day, and it was the weekend. Hundreds of weekend backpackers were on the trail and in the area. We had originally planned to go 13 miles that day to Sheep Lake. However, we grew concerned that there would be nowhere to camp by the time we got there. We were already exhausted by the difficulty of the day, and then there's this beautiful lake right in front of us, beckoning us to come take a swim. Doing some very precise hiker math, we decided that the math said to stay put and enjoy the lake. We found our own private campsite, just big enough for the three of us, with its own private little beach. We spent a glorious afternoon swimming and relaxing on the beach. Thank you, hiker math. Washington progressed with its cycle of go up, go down, go up, go down, but increased its difficulty and technicality each day. The trail for an entire week was nothing but rocks, shale, and scree. Our pace was slowed to about 1.5 miles per hour, making our 15-mile days almost twice as long. Remember when I said it was testing my will to live? As if things weren't enough, at the same time, the smoke appeared. We had been considerably lucky in this regard up to this point, so we really couldn't complain. The timing couldn't have been any more perfect though, as we finally were in an area of notable views, and we couldn't see any of it. But always looking for the bright side in things, I decided to find the beauty in it, as smoke does add a certain quality to sunrises and mountain vistas. I feel blessed that I got to see this area from a different viewpoint. All things went really well until Stevens Pass. Notification was sent out that there were 4 active wildfires between Stevens Pass and Harts Pass, which is roughly 160 miles of the trail. 3 of those 4 fires had already created trail closures, causing hikers to either bypass the area completely or take a PCT recommended detour. This created quite the dilemma, not just for us, but for every hiker making their way north. It was a large area to have to skip around, but the detour did not sound ideal either. At this point, we were on a deadline for finishing the trail. My mom and brother, along with Leonie's husband, had already prearranged to meet us in Manning Park, BC, the official end of the trail, on September 10th. We did not have the time to hike around a large detour. We decided to hike as far as we could to the first closure, leaving from Stevens Pass and making our way to the town of Tahachapi. From there, we would skip forward via vehicular transportation up to the village of Mazama, where we would get back on the trail at Harts Pass. This way, we would be able to hike a portion and then skip a portion. Seemed like a good compromise for us. We left Stevens Pass in good spirits, happy with our plan, and ready to finish off the final 2 segments of our journey. The PCT and I, however, were going to have one final face-off. Leaving Stevens Pass, I woke up that morning with a sore throat. I had just assumed it was from the heavy smoke that had been hanging around over Leavenworth, our town stop near Stevens Pass. Not feeling too concerned about it, we had a short first day as we didn't hit the trail until about 2 p.m. that afternoon. We hiked about 5 miles, called it good at a beautiful little camp along a creek and a meadow. The next morning, I woke up feeling like death. It was quite apparent it was not a sore throat from the smoke, but a full-blown cold. I felt awful. But being the trooper that I am, I brushed it aside, threw on my pack, and continued to hike. The next day, I felt even worse, but again, sucked it up and continued forward. I did surprisingly well considering how awful and how little energy I felt. That day, though, my illness was not the only thing we would need to be concerned about. As we continued to hike 15 miles north, we got increasingly closer and closer to a huge plume of smoke. I messaged my brother to confirm if what we were seeing was the fire called the airplane fire, or was this something new? He confirmed that it was the airplane fire. We knew about this one. It was the fourth active fire that had not yet closed the trail. We had not been too concerned about it because, like I said, the trail had not been closed. But knowing about something and actually seeing it are two different things. At one point, we rounded a corner and it was straight ahead of us. The flames hidden on the other side of the mountain, but the gigantic active smoke plume made it obvious that it was raging on the other side. We consulted our map and discovered that we were going to be headed straight for it. This created a multitude of concerns. Number one, I was having a hard enough time breathing from my illness. There was no way I was going to be able to hike in active smoke and not get super sick. Two, it wouldn't have been healthy for Leonie or Woodsy to breathe that in either. Three, our proximity to a raging inferno of flames made us super uncomfortable, knowing that we would never be able to outrun it should it catch up to us. And four, the wilderness area surrounding the fire had been closed right up to the trail itself. That seemed quite stupid in my opinion, to allow hikers to be that close to a closed trail area, but yet keep the trail open itself. We stood there and watched the smoke continue to plume larger and larger for quite a while, debating what to do. We were only about a mile from where we had planned to camp that night, so we decided to continue to camp and discuss our options once we got there. After setting up camp, I contacted my brother to ask if he could give us any information on which way the smoke was to blow the next day. He confirmed that it was to continue to blow into the valley we would be hiking through. A hiker we had seen a day before passed by our camp, now headed south. We stopped him to ask where he had turned around at. He had made it about 4 miles past our camp, and the smoke had been so thick he couldn't breathe or even see a few feet in front of him. Hearing that, we decided that we would also turn around and head back to Stevens Pass the next morning. Pivot. This was the second devastating decision I had had to make throughout this journey. PCT won this one. We were ravaged by a thunderstorm that night, blowing wind and rain that drenched our tents and created little lakes around them. By morning, the thunderstorm had passed, but the wind and rain continued. I did not really relish the idea of hiking in those conditions, as I was afraid I would catch pneumonia. So we decided to hunker down and try and wait it out. I sent another message to my brother asking for a weather update. He did not report back good news. Rain all day, snow that night. I decided I would rather risk getting pneumonia by hiking in the rain all day than risk freezing to death inside my tent from being wet, cold, and then snowed on. So at around 9 a.m., we packed up our gear and got the heck out of there. Heads down, tails between our legs. We commenced our most miserable day on trail, heading back to Stevens Pass. The air smelled like a cross between wet dog and a wet ashtray. It was disgusting. All the rain made us seriously doubt our choice to turn back, figuring the rain would have likely slowed down the fire, if not put it out. When we finally got back to Stevens Pass, we got an update, and it turned out the rain did nothing to slow that fire's rage. It had been approximately 5 miles from the trail when we were in the area. 3 days later, it was less than 1 mile. The next day, the PCTA closed the trail. Decision vindicated. Once back in Stevens Pass, we made our way north through a series of buses to Mazama Village, where a trail angel drove us up a very steep, windy dirt road to Hart's Pass. This is where we would get back on trail and complete the final 30 miles of the PCT. I truly believe that the PCT is a live entity. She is the combination of God, Mother Nature, time, space, energy, all of the things that are mysterious and magical about this earth we live on. Over the entirety of my journey, I had been aware of her, feeling her energy, feeling her testing me, and so I truly believe that she rewarded us for sticking with her, for making smart decisions, and for acknowledging her power and not thinking we could outbest her. Her reward for us was the most beautiful, perfect weather we could have ever asked for our final 3 days on trail. Beautiful blue skies, warm air, hot sunshine, gorgeously smooth sailing trail, and incredible views to top it all off. Out of the entire state of Washington, the final 30 miles were definitely the most breathtaking. The last 3 days went by as fast as they went slowly. I took more time to slow down and try and take it all in and enjoy those final moments. All of the different people I had hiked with during this epic journey, I had been the leader for about 90% of the time. Those last 3 days, I was last in line more than I was not, taking my time, stopping to appreciate the views, marveling in the journey, how far I'd come, both in distance and as a person. I shared a private moment with Leonie where we teared up and expressed our gratitude for each other. Neither of us would have been able to finish the trail had we not decided to hike together. I can't even accurately describe all of the things we went through together and my feelings of gratitude for her. Woodsy and I stood together and wept, and I mean tears streaming down our faces, as we stood on an open ridge and looked out at the beautiful expanse across from us. We both felt this deep connection with nature we'd been immersed in for the last 5 months, and both felt a sense of disbelief that this was about to be over. How does one go from seeing such amazing sights every day back to living in a city the next? It seemed unreal that would soon be our reality. Finally, or not finally, it was Terminus Day. We had a fast 8-mile hike from our last camp to the US-Canada border and the northern terminus. We each hiked a different amount of miles along our respective journeys. I came in at 1,306.8 miles, just under half the trail, thanks to the airplane fire. At approximately 10:45 a.m. on September 10th, just 5 months and 4 days since I took my first steps north from the Mexico border, I finally walked up to and touched the northern terminus. Yeah! Woo! My mission complete, my dream realized, my heart and soul filled with pride and an immense sense of accomplishment. After spending some time there, soaking in the moment, acknowledging this huge thing we just did and hugging it out, it was time for the last 8 miles, or 12 kilometers now that we were back in Canada, to reach our families waiting for us at Mannkirk. We practically ran the last couple of miles, which seemed to be the longest miles of the entire journey. Our arrival was loud and chaotic, between all the laughing and the crying and the shouts of joy. Dirty bodies, stinky gear, golden brown skin, much thinner waistlines, and smiles from ear to ear. We had done it. We were home, and we had gotten there together. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.